Okay, welcome to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is the beginning of season 2. So, welcome to our second season already. Our guest today is a very special person to me because she's the editor of all these podcasts. Her name is Dana Flowers, and she's been a professional voice talent for 11 years during and following a successful and fulfilling, she says, 16-year career as a water resources educator and public speaker. The necessity of creating online trainings for the Penn State Extension that required narration is what initially sparked her interest in voiceovers. She left Extension at the end of 2014 to fully embrace her entrepreneurial spirit, and despite several obstacles, has created a thriving business. Dana works out of her professionally built recording studio, which we get to see today, in southwestern Pennsylvania, and strives to provide clients impeccable audio quality. To this end, she has and continues to train with the industry's best coaches in performance and audio engineering. Dana has a strong faith in God, is an active member of a Presbyterian church where she volunteers for various programs and sings in the chancel choir. She has a strong sense of family and is dedicated to her family and friends as well as to helping others. So welcome, Dana. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And to have you on the other end of the mic.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that it would be interesting to kick off our second season with an interview with you so that people get to know behind the scenes what goes on with this particular podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, as I do with all our guests, and have you talk a bit about your own personal spiritual journey.
Okay.
So it's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, as many people, and as I've been editing some of your podcasts, I've been listening and learning a lot about how other people's spiritual journeys and how, in many cases, they're very similar to mine, and in many cases, very different. But there are elements that are similar in many of them. And I started out when I was a child. Sunday was, you went to Sunday school, you went to church, and it was never any kind of a thing where I felt obligated, but it was just that's what you did that on Sunday. That was what you did, and it was good for me in the sense that it was a sense of community. There were people there from my local community, but I got to know people differently there than I did through school, for example. Attending Sunday school, um, they were kids of varying ages for one thing, but when you were at school, you may not talk to the same kids all the time or be in the same classes and that kind of thing. So it gave me an opportunity to get to know different people and make some really good friends, and also learn a lot about God and the Bible. And I mean, the Sunday school is good for that, but um, I didn't really, God has always been a part of my life, but I have never really embraced it or embraced God to the extent that I have since later in life, since around 2013 or so. Um, I s- I moved around a lot. I went from college to I had a job. I was in Newcastle for a while, and then I moved to State College, Pennsylvania, for a while, and I was working up there at a nonprofit called Clearwater Conservancy. And when I was there, I was sort of struggling, trying to find my way and in my own personal journey. And And I never really found a church family or a church home there that I felt comfortable at, nor did I in Newcastle. And then I moved to Arizona, and same thing happened there. I struggled to find my way around and went to several different churches, didn't go to church for a while, tried a few more churches, never could really find a place where I felt like I fit. Until one day, there's a tiny little, it's a sort of a tourist place called Goldfield Gold Mines, and it's a little touristy town just outside of Apache Junction, Arizona. And it was an actual gold mine at one point in time in a thriving little town. It has been rebuilt in most from that to be a place where tourists can come. In that little town, there's a tiny little one-room church. Think Little House on the Prairie, but in the middle of the desert. And it was a very tiny little one-room church that they basically rebuilt to what it had been at some point in time in the past. And they had services there, and there was a lay minister there, and it was non-denominational. But I decided one Sunday, I thought, what could I lose? I mean, I haven't found where I fit. I didn't fit at the large non-denominational churches. I wasn't finding a Presbyterian church. I was raised Presbyterian. I was born into the Presbyterian church. I was raised Presbyterian, but I couldn't find one down there that I really felt like where I fit. So I started attending this little church every Sunday, and it made a big difference to me. It was maybe there was 10, 12 people in the congregation every Sunday, and then the lay pastor and his wife, and we would sing hymns. They would pass out papers with hymns on it, and they were old hymns that I remembered and recognized, and it became a place of solace for me. And I really enjoyed attending those services, and that was sort of the first time that I really started to embrace or understand some of the things in the Bible, in the passages and things and stories and whatnot. But then the pastor, he actually got to a point where I actually started to write in my Bible, and I would underline things, and I had notes that I wrote in the back of it. And one of the things that that really sticks out in my mind is that he said one day, and I was just thinking about this yesterday, as a matter of fact. It sticks out in my mind that he said one day, faith is like film. It's best developed in the dark. And I kind of just latched onto that because I realized that any of the darker times in my life, and up to then I didn't have any really dark times, but there were, times of struggle or whatever. It really made sense to me. And that actually helped me in later years because then after I moved back here, I had started attending the church that I had gone to here up until I was about fifth grade. Still didn't feel like a perfect fit for me here, but it was a Presbyterian church, but I didn't feel like it was a perfect fit for me. But I also at that point in time just found out that I had breast cancer around 2013. And it became very important to me. That phrase, that comment, stuck in my head because when you're going through something like breast cancer, you kind of go into some dark places sometimes in your head thinking about different things, but that actually really helped me. And in the year of 2013, there were several things that happened during that time frame that really made a big impact on my spiritual journey, and one of them was. It was the first time in my life I had ever felt prayer. It was the first time I'd ever, when all of these different people were telling me they were praying for me, and people were having my mass said in my name at different churches and different things, and it was the first time in my life I ever actually felt prayers of other people, and it was amazing, and it was such an amazing feeling of warmth and comfort, and like I was just being surrounded by a warm blanket, and and I knew that everything was going to be okay, and I knew that God was with me, and I knew that God was with me through their prayers, and that made an enormous difference for me. And I maintained a positive attitude the whole time through all of that, and kind of turned it into a job going through cancer. And okay, what's next? What's next on my list that I have to do? Because that's okay. There is no other option than to come out the other end of this. And so, what do I have to do next to make that happen? And yeah, I'm very much a rule follower when it comes to certain things, and following doctor's orders is one of those things. So I paid attention to what the nurses and doctors told me and did what I was supposed to do. When I was coming near the end of my radiation course of radiation, I had surgery, then chemo, then radiation. I had actually for quite some time stopped going to church, maybe a year or so before that. I had some struggles in my marriage, and it just felt like I was struggling. And so there's the church that I attend now, which is Latrobe Presbyterian Church in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. They have during the summer, they have early services at a little chapel called Unity Chapel. And I don't know really what possessed me to wake up that morning and get out of bed and go to that early service, but I did. And, I walked in there, I had no hair because my hair had not grown back. I had a little bit of a peach fuzz, but that was it. And I was so tired. It was hot that summer. I had no interest in wearing my wig or a hat or anything like that. I just thought, you know what? I don't care. I'm going in this way. This is how I'm going. God doesn't care if I have any hair on my head when I walk in church. So that's the way I'm going. So I walked in, I got up, I rolled out of bed and I went. And it wasn't even something I had any forethought about. I just woke up that morning and said, I'm going. And I went. And I've been at that church ever since. It felt like home to me. Not Unity Chapel specifically, because their regular services are over in downtown Latrobe at their Main Street church. But I walked in there and I realized, first of all, sitting through the service, that I was a Presbyterian. I had attended many other churches, non-denominational, Lutheran, Catholic, all kinds of other churches, and in my search over the years. And I walked in and I sat down, and the minister that was there at the time, just sitting there and listening to him and going through the different parts of the service and everything, I just thought, wow, it just felt like home. It felt very comfortable to me. And it was just, I thought, you know what? I'm such a Presbyterian. Um, but the other thing that really helped that at that point in time was that I knew people there. I didn't know that I knew people that were members of that church until I walked in the door that day. And one of them was my high school choir director. And I walked after the service. She was standing out by the back door, and I walked up to her, and she hadn't seen me in a long time. And of course, I had no hair. So she's looking at me kind of quizzically, and I said, it's Dana. And she's like, oh, it's Dana Flowers. She said, well, and you have to know this woman. She's absolutely hysterical, but she says what's on her mind. And she just looked at me and she said, well, where's your hair? And so, I gave her a little brief overview of the fact that I had had cancer that year, et cetera. And she's like, oh, well, then she grabbed my arm and she pulled me up to the front of the church, to the front of the chapel, up to the choir director, organist, and his name's Michael. And she said, Michael, Dana's coming here now and she's going to join the choir. It was the very first day I attended that church. It was so funny. And sure enough, I'm in the choir. But it took me a couple months. I started attending every Sunday, but then it took me somewhere around Thanksgiving. Michael started saying, "Hey, just sing for Christmas. See how you like it." And I haven't stopped since. I've been there, been in the choir ever since, and I officially changed my letter and joined that church. And I've been there ever since. And that really has that church really has made, and the community there and the people there have really made a big difference in my spiritual journey. But the other thing several other things happened. I went through a divorce, and and it was a fairly uncomfortable and unfortunate several years prior to that, and there were a lot of not good things that had happened, and and I was in a pretty dark place. And the year that my divorce went through, several things happened. I had a very strange interaction with the interim minister at the time. Then I had to put my dog down that year. I got divorced that year. It was just a rough year. But it was in that year that I actually, again, I go back to the faith is best developed, like faith is like film, it's best developed in the dark, because I had a lot of, it was probably some of the darker times that I've ever had in my life. And between church, the people at church, not necessarily the services on Sunday, but the people there at church, and friends and family, I got through all of that darkness. But the biggest part of that was God, the biggest part of getting me through. And it was interesting because it was then, and it's taken me till I was 49 years old at the time, that I really, I have prayed all my life, but not with any regularity, any passion, intensity, that kind of thing. And during that time is when I developed that. And it just sort of happened one day. I was literally on the floor, sitting on the floor crying. And I just said, God, I can't do this by myself. I need you. And from there on out, it just became a very, several times a day, but daily thing for me, that I have to have this conversation with God, because my day just doesn't go as well without it. And, and there have been a lot of people, and it has continued to now. And that was 2 years ago. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. There have been several people who came forward in my life that I would have never guessed would have come forward in my life to be there and sort of be my strength, and help be part of my strength. And I know that they were put there by God, and I know that they were put there for a reason. And that's how I've gotten to where I am right now. Yeah, so there have been several things over the years that have really impacted me. I I have a very, very strong feeling of wanting to help others and be there for other people, and that to me is very important, and it's a way for me to honor God. So that's one of the other things that's important to me.
Is that new or something that you've felt throughout your life?
Helping others?
Yes.
No, I've had that my entire life. That's always been very, very important to me.
Okay.
Very important to me.
Well, I appreciate the help you're giving me. I know that you have a busy schedule with all your voiceover work. So what in the world made you want to pick up my podcast and say, okay, I'll do this?
Well, I think God did, but I certainly, after chatting with you and then meeting with you the first time, it really hit close to home for me, because it's so fascinating to me to listen to other people's spiritual journeys and to learn where they've come from, how they've gotten to where they are, and to be able to be part of that. I think is just yet another, with you, is just yet another way for me to be able to give back, and to honor God, and to be able to exponentially help other people. Because of course, if I'm helping you with this project, you interviewing one person, how many people are going to hear that, and how impactful that's going to be on so many other people. And if and I'm honored to be able to be part of that, to be able to help get that word out there, to help other people. I think sometimes it's just a matter of of, one of the episodes they were talking about, somebody had talked about committing suicide, not your guest, but somebody else in their life. And you think about those kinds of things, and you just never know what is going to shift somebody in a different direction, in a positive direction, if they're in a negative place in their mind. And I think that your podcast has enormous potential to do that. So
it's funny you would bring that up, because I just finished an interview with somebody who was chronically depressed for 50 years. And she got to the point where she was so close to suicide that she had written notes to both of her children as to why she would no longer be around, and ready to do it at that moment, and just suddenly had an inspiration. And that word inspiration really means in spirit.
yes.
That somehow spirit talked to her and said, there might be something that you don't know right now that you need to discover that's going to make your life worth living.
Yeah.
And she put down her pen when she was writing these notes to her children, and went up to her computer and Googled ways to combat depression. And she had tried therapy, she had tried drugs, she had just been to a Western Psychiatric Institution for long periods of time, and knew that after 50 years there was no way that she could combat it. And she found people who had dealt with it, and ways that went beyond Western medicine. And she started to look into those things, and she's now a very happy-go-lucky, joyful person.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah.
So, everybody has their own journey, and sometimes, like you said, it's out of the darkness that you find your faith.
Yeah.
And there's just so many stories out there, so many different journeys, so many different paths, and all those paths leading to the same place.
To the same place.
Yeah. It's just, I find it fascinating, and I'm just so glad you're with me on this journey,
So am I.
this podcast journey. I've also come to the conclusion that for a lot of people, that moment that you had where you finally said, when you're on the floor, God, I can't do this by myself. That seems to be a critical moment for a lot of people. Not everybody has to go there.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And that's the moment of release.
It is.
That you learn, well, if I turn this over to God, then I don't, I'm not alone in this. And once you discover that you're not alone, then all things are possible.
Yes, exactly. And it was interesting because that moment when I was on the floor, prior to me saying that, coming to that point, I was crying, and I was, and I felt I was in pain. I mean, it hurt. Like I was physically in pain sitting there on the floor crying. And then, and it full of sorrow and everything. And then that came over me, and I said that out loud to God. And after that, I kept crying, but it was a very different kind of crying. It was, I wouldn't call it happy, necessarily, but it wasn't full of pain anymore. It was I was almost crying out of relief, like as if I just had this crushing weight sitting on me, and now it was gone. And it was a turning point for me.
Yeah, it's I would describe it, and it wasn't my tears, but as a release.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so that you're releasing the pain, and it's gone.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So while you were taking notes in your Bible and underlining things, did nobody say you're defacing God's word?
Oh yeah, I heard people tell me that. But I also thought, you know what? God wants me to know these things and remember these things, and I'm really bad at memorizing things, and this is why I like to do voiceover, because I have a script in front of me all the time. But I'm not great. I'm terrible at memorizing things, and it was just, and I started by putting bookmarks like on every, but then I had so many bookmarks in there, and I thought this is crazy, and I didn't know exactly what I was bookmarking because I couldn't. And I thought, no, God wants me to know these things, and He wants me to remember these things, and so
Yeah.
this is my way, His way of making sure I do. I will say that during sort of my lowest point, when I was especially that year that I was struggling through the divorce and putting my dog down and all the other stuff that was happening, there were several other things. Matthew 6:25-34 was where I lived. I lived in that passage about not being anxious, because I just it just made an enormous difference to me. Like I read it probably 3-4 times a day. That page was getting worn out in my Bible, but because and it made an enormous difference for me. And every time I'd start to feel that, I was compelled to go pick up my Bible and just open it to those pages and read it.
Yeah.
And again, you'd think I'd have the entire thing memorized by now as often as I read it, but I don't. I still have to go read it. And I think that God does that on purpose with me, because He knows that I'm, I think that sometimes for me, when I memorize the things that I do have memorized, you start to say them with, it's rote. You don't really, and you're not taking them in and internalizing them. And when I sit and I read it, it's very impactful.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, that passage that you mentioned also reminds me of the passage about the fact that God takes care of the birds, God takes care of the flowers. So why wouldn't God take care of you?
Exactly. Exactly.
Are you not just as important as the flowers and the birds and everything else in creation?
Yeah. There's a song out there too that sings essentially that, and the verse, the lyrics are that essentially. And anytime I hear that, it always brightens my day, because it makes me think of that. But
well, even though I'm tempted, I won't ask you to sing.
No, don't ask me to sing. I always say, I think it goes along with my helper attitude or helper personality, is that I like being a second alto. I'm supporting the other, and I'm harmony. I'm not melody. Anything. I'm okay with that.
That's funny, because I've heard the same thing from my wife. She's a second alto, and a lot of the people in the choir have done solos, and she said, "No, I'm in the supporting cast. That's my role.
I'm a backup singer. I like being a backup singer." But yeah, choir just singing. Even through my darkest times, going to choir practice always made things better. Just singing God's praises, basically, and just being able to be in that space, be in the church, and it was helpful. It was very helpful to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting back to your question about the Bible, writing in the Bible. Yeah, I've heard several times over the years, "Oh, you should never do that." Like, well, you know what? I think He's okay with it, because
Yeah, somehow when I I was raised with the concepts of you never drop the flag on the ground
Exactly.
and you never write in the
Right in the
Bible.
Bible. Exactly. I grew up
Two
the same way.
no-nos.
Yep, I grew up the same way. I still don't drop the flag on the ground, but
Yeah.
but
Well, this has been great. I think it's
yes.
a great way to kick off our second season.
Well, thank you. I'm honored.
Uh, Now, you know that I ask my interviewees at the end of each podcast to leave our audience with some words of wisdom. So here you are,
Here I am now. It's my turn.
and it's your
Um,
turn.
so
Just
gosh,
some thoughts. Don't
yeah,
feel like they have to be so wise, but just some
yeah.
thoughts.
It's I think as far as my faith is concerned, I think the word stingy comes in mind because it's something that I read sometimes. I'm a lector at church also, and so and sometimes when I'm reading like the prayers of confession or something like that, that word stingy comes in, that we are stingy with our faith in general, a lot of people, and we don't get it out there and show it to people. We keep it under that bushel basket and we don't let other people see it. And I think that one of the things I have discovered, and I've heard that my whole life, and I thought I was, putting it out there, but I realized I haven't been. And in the last couple of years, since my moment on the floor, if you will, it's something that I think is very important. And it's not about standing on a street corner preaching. It's about just loving others, being, you know, being the way God wants us to be with other people, and being that beacon, being that example of God's love. And it's just so important to show that to other people, and to give that to other people. And I think that some people think that, well, I just don't have the energy to do that, or I don't have the I don't have enough love to give, or whatever, to just anybody and everybody. But the interesting thing that I have found is that the more I give, the more filled I am. And the more I give love, the more filled I am with love and energy and happiness and everything. And not to make it sound like a selfish thing, like I'm getting something out of this, but it's you have so much in you and you don't even realize it. And it's absolutely critical that you just give it away, and other people will benefit from it, but you will too. And so there's that. And then just being able to, the two things, that's one thing. And then the other thing that has been so important to me in life, and particularly, well, throughout life. My mother always called me her happy child, her happy baby, because I always smiled all the time. And I know that I've had times in my life where I didn't smile as much and didn't have as much to smile. It felt like I didn't have as much to smile about. But I have discovered that keeping that positive attitude, but relying on God to help me keep that positive attitude, is such an important thing. I can't do it by myself.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't do it by myself. And I need him. And keeping that positive attitude, but, having him help me get me there every day is so critical. But then that also gives me the energy and the ability to do what I said before, and that's to be able to share that love with other people.
Right. Well, to your first point, I'm a strong believer in the fact that giving is receiving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that we can't give what we don't have. And we often don't know we have something until we do give it. And so that whole idea of giving love is a way to remind yourself that you do have love.
Yeah.
And that's why you can give it.
Yeah. And it's not, it doesn't have to be grand gestures. It's, saying something kind to the person who's checking you out at the store. It's just, sometimes that's all it takes.
Right.
And that's all it is.
Well,
But sometimes that can be huge in whoever's life you're giving that to.
And that second thing you mentioned, your smile. That's something else you can give everybody.
Absolutely.
And you smile at somebody, they have to smile back.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And I actually love doing that. When I'm walking somewhere, just out for a walk or something, or if I'm on my way somewhere, but out walking and people are passing me, and oftentimes, people don't try to avoid eye contact and stuff. And I'll look straight at people in the eye and just smile at them. And I know it takes them, you can see that it's,
Yeah.
they're taken aback by it almost. But then if I say, or good morning or whatever it is, I'll say something like that. And then I just keep going on my way, and their face lights up. They, it just, and that, I love doing that. I just do. I get immense pleasure out of that, but it's just.
Well, you have a great smile.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So that wraps up another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. As you know, listeners, your homework is think about what you've heard today, see what resonates with you, and maybe sit with that for a while. Until next time, I'll see you then.